This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello everyone, welcome to another NitPix review. Get comfortable, moving close to the screen, absorb my voice into your delicate earlobes because we're taking it slow today. I just want to talk about downsizing for a bit, since you cheeky monkeys voted for it on my Twitter. So downsizing cheated all of us, and I think it's fair to say that no one likes a cheater. It sold itself as a quirky sci-fi film where Matt Damon goes small. It's all over the trailers and the posters. Look how small he is. But we didn't get that at all. There's no charm, no sci-fi, and barely any small people. All it really did try to do is make a social political message, and even then it was undistinguished, murky, and badly executed. But you might think downsizing is an easy target, considering it was a commercial and critical flop. The mass consensus on downsizing is, it's a bit shit. Despite this, I feel like everyone has a curiosity about this film. Not intense enough to actually go watch it obviously, but intense enough that you turn to a video essayist to satiate that curiosity. And since no one else has done it yet, I figured I might as well be the one to do it. And who knows, maybe I'll try and legitimize myself some more by making up more bullshit film terminology. Downsizing was sold as what I'd call a Smol movie. Not a small movie, a Smol movie. An example of a small movie is Lord of the Rings with those hobbits, or Time Bandits with those dwarfs. A Smol movie would be something like Arrietty or The Borrowers, tiny little people that fit in your palm. Small people experience the world the same way as you do, their shortness mostly functioning as a stylistic decision more than anything else. Those munchkins perceive that yellow brick road just the same as anyone else in The Wizard of Oz. Small people experience our world in a completely different way. An ordinary unthreatening bowl of cereal becomes something dangerous and terrifying when you're a small person. These types of films are often overlooked and unappreciated, and they breed a very specific type of charm which makes them really fun to engage with. And I generally rate small movies an 8 out of 10. But Downsizing isn't a small movie, as much as it's trying to convince us that it is one. It starts its trickery as we see a Norwegian scientist invent shrinking technology. We then see a press conference where it's unveiled to the world. This segment goes on for 15 minutes. We see Paul, played by Matt Damon, respond to this new discovery. His reaction is, oh, that's cool. He goes home to his mother and gives her an injection. From there, we suddenly go 10 years into the future. The concept of downsizing is reintroduced to us. Now everyone's doing it, and there are several small cities. The world has had to adapt to service small people, and there's a lot of politics brewing. The entire film could have started right here. I do not understand why we needed to watch a 15-minute press conference. Oh, Paul is also reintroduced to us. He now has a wife instead of a mother, but not a whole lot has changed really. Unsatisfied with life, Paul and his wife look into finding a new place to live. His wife seems to think it's somehow realistic to be checking out mansions, despite the fact that Paul receives what I would assume is a pretty measly paycheck from his job as a workplace physiotherapist at a meat factory. But Paul decides enough is enough, and after seeing how good some of his old friends have it, him and his wife opt to downsize. Because when you downsize, everything costs less.
Oh, but Jeff, they look so good on me, and you should see
How
them.
much, Laura?
Well, Jeff.
I said how much?
$83.
$83? Are you crazy? Why, that's practically our food budget for 2 whole months.
And so they sign all the paperwork and boom, congrats, you're small now. But oh no, your wife didn't actually want to go small and didn't go through with it. And now you're small and your wife wants to leave you. This leaves Matt Damon well and truly cucked. Okay, so we've got our elaborate setup. Our protagonist has just made a huge life decision, and now he's been forced to reassess his self-esteem, his lifestyle, and all other manners of feelings that come with being jilted. He's in a new environment, a modern city for little Smurf people. Who knows where downsizing will take us? Fuck! Usually in a small movie, when the protagonist turns small, the second act of the narrative begins. I'm a secret government agent minding my own business. Oh no, I'm small and inside a human body, assisting an operation. I'm a young rapscallion, not a care in the world. Oh no, I'm small and fighting a scorpion. I'm Jack Black and I work in a mailroom. Oh no, I'm a giant among all these small people. Wait, no, that's not right. Anyway, you get my point. Because naturally, significantly changing a protagonist's anatomy is a pretty big deal. If you think of Spider-Man, Freaky Friday, or American Werewolf in London, those transformations lead the narrative and inform the main themes of the film. Whereas in Downsizing, it moves 1 year into the future and Paul is reintroduced to us again. He lives in a city as a recently divorced man. He works in a call center, and he just so happens to be small. Aside from the occasional line of dialogue and overly sized prop, you wouldn't even know these people were a few inches tall. Which leaves the question, why did they make him small in the first place? Is it because the writer-director of this film, Alexander Payne, is a talentless hack? You might be thinking to yourself, what's a AAA actor who's known for such classics as Rounders, Matt Damon, doing in this strange movie about small people? Well, I did some digging and managed to find out that Matt Damon is a huge fan of the writer-director of this film.
There's never been a bad performance in an Alexander Payne movie.
Naturally, I was curious about this, so I decided to check Alexander Payne out. And holy shit, this man is a beast. Alexander Payne writes and directs some of the most interesting, provocative, intimate, absurdist character dramedies I have ever seen. The fact that his films don't seem to be in the public consciousness at all feels like a real tragedy. I'm not kidding when I say I would put his film Election on the same level as Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Heathers, or Mean Girls. It's proper classic material. So why haven't you heard about him up until this point? It's probably the same reason why he's so defined as a filmmaker. Alexander Payne approaches his films with an articulate cynicism that finds its way into almost all his films. None of the characters he writes are good, kind, or even likable. They're pathetic, selfish, lying losers who look as ugly as they are. They're also denied the chance to redeem themselves and maintain their flaws to the end. These are not characters that you want to imagine yourself as. Everyone feels good vibing with Jules as he guns down people and quotes the Bible. Every 16-year-old who's so into film wants to be Tyler Durden. But no one wants to project themselves onto these deplorable losers. It makes for a slightly uncomfortable viewing experience when you find yourself inevitably seeing your own ugliness being reflected in Alexander Payne's characters. With Downsizing, however, Payne decided to focus on acts of kindness instead of acts of selfishness. And we all know what happens when you shift from being negative to being positive. Your views drop. Paul, the protagonist of Downsizing, is someone who's quite nice, polite, timid, and ordinary. He's pretty much a blank canvas.
He's just a very good, conscientious guy. And he's
a fully grey speck. He's in a passionless relationship, a dead-end job, and a vacant social life. This isn't all too different from Paul Giamatti's character, Miles, in Sideways, which is also directed by Alexander Payne. They're both schlubs. The difference is in the quality of writing. Miles has clear goals. He wants to be an author and has a desire for intimacy. When we see him fail at these goals, we see the true character come out. We see the characteristics that truly make him pathetic, and we feel empathy. It creates an intimacy between that character and the audience, making the narrative gripping and immersive. Paul is a man with no goals and nothing really to lose. The decisions he makes are inconsistent, and he just goes with the flow and follows the crowd, never really making any decisions for himself. This is called being a lazy protagonist, and no, I didn't make that up. He asks this woman he's dating if he can meet her child, and she says no. So he goes to a small people party, which is basically a normal person party, since the only thing that's regular sized is this rose. While there, he takes the ecstasy and there's this trippy drug montage, which is definitely the most stylistic part of this film. He's shown to have the romantic goal of wanting to spouse up again, only for him to suddenly have his conservative, timid characteristics be replaced for a man out to party until he drops. So, this is the start of his character arc, right? This is where our protagonist finally starts to change? No, not really. He wakes up after the party fully back to the same hapless, nervous man he was before. So what was the point of this party sequence? Beats me. I don't know. While recovering from the night before, he notices a woman is walking with a limp. Because Paul is the best darn physiotherapist in Smol Town, he's able to tell Knock Lan exactly what pain she's feeling. Almost like how Matt Damon can tell what cards everyone has in Rounders.
Well, You were looking for that third 3, but you forgot that Professor Green folded it on 4th Street, and now you're representing it.
Friend, I can see that you have a really, really bad prosthetic foot, and I'm sure it's causing you pain in your right hip and knee, probably your other knee, your lower back.
Well, kiss my ass.
Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.
How you know these things?
Not Lan is so impressed with Matt Damon's psychic abilities that she demands that he comes back to her place to, offer medical assistance to her friend with cancer. Paul obviously accepts because he can't make any decisions for himself. He's lazy, he's a lazy protagonist. He comes back later and Not Lan's friend is now dead, which I think is treated like a joke.
Where's Gladys?
Oh, she died.
No, I'm so sorry.
I think maybe I give her too much pill. Anyway, she died very happy, smiling.
Okay. We're treated to some brilliant dialogue and a Golden Globe performance from Hong Chow. But oh no, he broke her prosthetic foot. Now he has to be her bitch boy and carry her around and help her look after poor Smol people. That's right, there are poor Smol people, and yes, they live in Smol slums. I blame Smol Trump. At this point in the film, it becomes clear that downsizing has a social political message. However, it's a little unclear as to what that message is. Also, by the film's own logic, it's unclear how there could be poor small migrants that live in a wooden box. The point of downsizing is that your money becomes more valuable when you shrink. Diamond jewelry are shown to cost $80. Is Not Lan being paid like 20 cents a day? After breaking her foot, Not Lan aggressively forces Matt Damon to be her assistant. He does this out of guilt or because he's too nice to say no. Either way, he's now going around the slums, offering medical assistance, collecting free food to give away, and cleaning houses. Remember when you thought this would be a small movie? Now you're watching this kid with ringworm. That's what it feels like to be cheated. Going small is seen as helping the environment. It produces less waste and solves the problem of overpopulation. But the dark side is that fascist governments will shrink people against their will as a punishment. This is what happened to Not Lan, who was a political activist before she was made small and became a cleaner. There doesn't seem to be any kind of building on these contrasting ideas, and it seems like they're in the film because Payne thought it would be a cool idea. Earlier in the film, there's an exchange where this man in a bar talks about how small people shouldn't have a right to vote. His argument makes sense, and I was interested to see where this idea would be taken. But the answer is nowhere. These ideas purely exist in the simplest of forms, because none of the ideas in this film are ever built on. It ends up feeling fickle and empty with its political identity. After a few weeks, Not Lan hasn't been able to find a replacement foot. She now walks using a peg leg instead. Paul is still helping her out, but luckily our friend Dushan has Paul's back, and comes up with a plan to get his friend out of the unfortunate predicament of cleaning houses. Dushan, who's played by Christopher Waltz, is Paul's neighbour and runs an import business. He illegally makes products for small people and smuggles them in. Out of all the themes and ideas farted out by downsizing, the most potent fart is on consumerism and capitalism. The kind of people who would want to go small are people who value expensive homes, items and lifestyles over their own anatomy. People who idolize a specific lifestyle presented to us in media, who are so desperate for it that they'd abandon meaningful relationships with their friends and family to live in a perfectly clean city with a lot of money. Dushan is a character that functions to strip away that idea at the seams. Dushan is the embodiment of the capitalist ideology. He's highly indulgent, uncaring, and focused on money, but he's never framed as anything other than a quippy, friendly bro to Matt Damon. I thought he would take on the role as an antagonist for Paul, but it becomes clear that the film never wants to punish or even criticize Dushan. He's pretty much only in this film to get Paul out of cleaning with Not Lan. He tells Paul that he has a delivery to Norway and asks Paul to give him a hand. Paul accepts because agreeing to do things is what he does best. Oh, and Not Lan also comes because the scientist who invented downsizing is going to be there and she really wants to meet him. So it's kind of counterintuitive, really. So now they're on their way to Norway. There isn't much to say here except for the fact that Paul and Not Lan fuck on the boat, even though they have no chemistry. It feels awkward and they're just sort of together from this point onwards. The very next day, Paul wakes up to find the scientist who invented downsizing crying about the world ending. It's ending because methane gas is coming out of Antarctica. What? So we have racism, consumerism, and pollution? This film is the equivalent of a 22-year-old white guy who's just come back from his gap year. Listen man, there's so many people out there who need help, and the only way we can change the world is by being true to ourselves and consuming less. The only leakage of methane gas I can observe is the gas coming out of Alexander Payne's Botticello. Ho ho, good day sir. Once they get to Norway, the whole place looks really nice, like Hobbit Town, and everyone starts to get ready for the end of the world. They've built a bunker and all the small people are going to hide in it. They plan to live there for 200 years and then emerge to make a small people paradise. Everyone's super nice and on that hippie vibe, and Matt Damon gets proper caught up in all of it. He looks the happiest he's ever looked in the whole movie. Look at him prance! So the hippie community invite them all to live with them in their bunker, and Paul is 100% game, but none of his mates are. They don't even seem that fazed about the approaching gas. Nock lands upset because she can't figure out what kind of fuck Paul gave her.
Love fuck, hate fuck, sex only fuck, break up fuck.
Neither can I, to be honest. Paul has shown pretty much no emotion up until the point where he started playing the fucking bongos. Paul says his goodbyes and enters the bunker, but he changes his mind halfway and proposes his love to Nock Lan.
And what you were asking? It was a love fuck.
Such a beautiful love story. He finally made a decision. Such a filmic spectacle. Boy, am I glad I watched all that small people shit. They go back to Leisureland and continue to help people. And then the film just ends. It staggers and sputters about like a recently shot antelope stumbling towards a lake because it doesn't want to embrace its inevitable death. Its breathing is heavy. It has no energy. It slumps into the soft, mossy floor. It hears the faint cries of its children in the distance, and then blank. No meaning, no purpose, just an isolated explosion of energy. It ends. Paul goes back to doing exactly what he was doing 30 minutes ago, presumably in a relationship with a woman that is constantly belittling him. They carry on helping people in a world which is going to end due to pollution very shortly. I guess the end note of the film is to choose acts of kindness over selfish acts, that life is more fulfilling when you're caring for people in a less fortunate situation than you. But when you clog up that very basic, simple message with a whole bunch of shit that's not relevant or elaborated on, it makes the most unsatisfying conclusion to any story. Film is built around actions and consequences, events big or small. Alexander Payne has a reputation of making films where very little things happen in them, but the events in his films are cathartic and have a sense of pathos. In Sideways, Jack cheats on his fiancée, and then we have a consequence. In Citizen Ruth, characters make terrible life decisions, and there's visible consequences that motivate the plot forward. Alexander Payne films usually have clear second acts, which dictate the film's conflict and frames the characters in a new environment which makes them uncomfortable. With Downsizing, so little actually happens that you spend the whole film trying to figure out what its message is or what it's trying to say. You might be thinking that Downsizing is simply a standard bad movie. This was Alexander Payne's biggest production ever. He was working on this film for 7 years. The man is undeniably an auteur in his own right, and Downsizing subverts expectations of small movies and dares to try to do something different. It decides to abandon conventional narrative structure, which, considering his writing credits, looks like a conscious decision. Alexander Payne's films in the past have mostly received strong critical acclaim, with a small box office return. It's clear to me that at this point he is so stubborn and resistive to studio interference and feedback that he pushed forward with a script that fundamentally didn't work. When Paramount was in talks with Payne on making Downsizing, Paramount's then CEO said, "I know it doesn't make sense on paper, but we'd do it anyway." Downsizing had all the ingredients to be a fantastic film. It's a film that could have put Alexander Payne on the map. But the creative decisions behind this project has led to a film which fluctuates between satire and realism, surreal sci-fi concepts and white guilt. A film that is fully charmless, pedestrian and pointless. Downsizing is nothing more than a waste of your time. 0 out of 10. Go watch Election. But what do you think about Downsizing, small movies, or Alexander Payne? Let me know down below, and make sure to like and subscribe for more NitPix content. And check out my Twitter to take part in more votes. And if this video was something that you did genuinely enjoy, then you have Squarespace to thank, since they have brought it to you. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform which offers easy to use and customizable templates, allowing you to construct the website that's perfectly suited to you. You don't even gotta install, patch or upgrade anything ever, and with that award-winning 24/7 customer service, you know you're in safe hands, bro. So don't be a square, head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/nitpix to save 10% off your first purchase.